Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Omega Files. I'm your host, Dr. Freedom, and tonight we've gathered to sit down and have a little talk about Arachnids in the UK. A tale of spiders, mad American politicians with guns, amongst other things. Okay, well, I want to hear your guys' view on it, so we're going to go ahead and go around the panel here. All right, let's start at the bottom this week. We'll start with Texas. Tim, what did you think of Arachnids in the UK?
Like a lot of episodes, it started out okay, but then it ultimately ended up being a bit of a mess towards the end. The premise is good, and it was a lot of fun at first. Let's just put it that way. This just got kind of ridiculous. I mean, suddenly the person that knows everything about what's going on is right there in the hallway, and then later, of course, there's like an exposition dump where the doctor has to explain everything to everybody in the room, and I just thought it was a bit clumsy, I think. And then you have the guy that the cowardly guy who's really kind of funny at first ends up being just a Trump caricature, which is kind of insulting. So, I mean, I don't know. The whole thing could have been a lot better. It started out really fun, I think, until about 15 minutes in. This got kind of clumsy with a lot of the storytelling. I think it really suffered from bad writing in some ways. But this is the problem with trying to tell a good story in 50 minutes. It's not always easy. And I think this has been one of the problems the show has had for the last few years, is that it's hard to assemble a really groundbreaking, awesome episode with just that little time. And you have to, take shortcuts, and sometimes it should just flash up on the screen. This is a shortcut. I mean, it's that clumsy. So that's my take on it.
All righty then. Okay, moving along. Let's move up to Connor Farley. What do you think?
Yeah, it was all right. It was nothing particularly to write home about. It was a bit of a romp. I think it was the first romp we've really had this year, where there wasn't really any consequence to anything that happened. It was just, give you a stupid monster and you can run around for 50 minutes. I have to agree with Texas Tim. One of the things that I pointed out after the episode, the very first thing actually, was that 50 minutes really suffocates the life out of Doctor Who at the moment. It's obviously 5 minutes more than we used to get, but I think that 90 minutes, a mini movie, would always be the perfect length for a Doctor Who episode. I just don't think that the genre or what they're trying to achieve week on week can be done in 50 minutes effectively. Chris Chibnall's by no means a bad writer. I guess for this one, he was just going for the stupid 50 minutes of monster romp. It was compared to a 50s horror B movie by one of the reviews. I think it was the Radio Times. Did feel like that. The premise was good. The spiders were really creepy. There was a lot of spine-tingling moments at the beginning with them finding the woman, Anna, pretty much consumed in web. In her own bed. Then the spiders looked incredibly creepy. That's really great CGI again from Dean Egg. I liked Chris Noth. I don't think he by any means stole the episode, but he was ridiculous. He actually made your blood boil at some points, just how ignorant and how stupid he was being. And the whole thing at the end about, why can't you just shoot things like normal people, was one of the most infuriating lines I've ever heard in recent years. It's just completely, he is a Trump caricature who got a mention in the episode. Surprise. But for the episode, he just came across as really stupid, and I think that kind of worked. He was great. The guest cast was I think it was a bit weak. Yasmin's mum was all right, and Tanya Fear's character, I can't remember her name, as the scientist sort of person, was fairly decent. I just don't think that 50 minutes is ever good. And I think for an introduction to Yaz's sort of world, where we've had basically 3 episodes of Ryan, I think it's a bit of an injustice, to be honest. It was all right. It was middling, to be fair. It wasn't any. It will be forgettable. You'll forget about it in a year, probably. It's a bit of that sort of like thin ice, sort of pyramid at the end of the world, sort of filler. It wasn't bad, so I'm not going to bash on it.
Alrighty then. Okay, let's move over to Dr. Grimm. What did you think of it?
I thought it was okay. I didn't think that it was great like the others. The cast seemed to be getting on a bit better with each other now. It sort of reminded me a bit of the story, The Green Death, if any of you viewers remember that, with toxic waste down a mine, and it increases the size of the insects or whatever. So there was little bits of that in it. I think this episode was aimed more for the children and the arachnophobes, maybe, to give them a bit of a jump scare. I don't think most adults would appreciate it as much, but yeah, I think it was mainly aimed for the children. Like Chris Chibnall said originally, he wants to make it a family thing. All the children can watch it. So yeah, I think this one was for them. But yeah, I liked it. I thought the spiders were really well done. Yeah, basically, it wasn't great, but it was enjoyable.
All righty. Okay, let's move on over to William.
I'm going to start it off by saying I'm very disappointed with this episode because it could have been much better in certain ways. The first 10 minutes was started off real good. But instead of having people face what happened in the previous story, like say like Graham's wife being killed, and then instead we see the flashbacks of him remembering her, and of course this guy remembering his grandma, and then of course this girl dealing with her family and job. Instead, we got them in a situation that had to deal with the spiders like that. And this could have been done in 2 certain ways. It could have been an episode with them dealing with the reality of life without the doctor, or this could have been an episode with the doctor not having companions and dealing with the spiders somewhere else. Could have been that easily done. And then the Chris North character, yeah, you can see the pompous rich man, like the way we're dealing here in the United States with the current person in the White House like that. But I'm a little bit disappointed in this. Again, it doesn't mention what happened to his character at the end of the story. It just jumped to the characters going back home, and instead of dealing with the aftermath, they decided to escape with the doctor again from the responsibilities of their jobs and their family, which makes it almost, if you look, when you see that specific scene, it almost like the doctor has become a drug to them for escape the reality of death and all that, and all family, and that's not the way it is. And I'm a little bit disappointed in the doctor that she stumbles around like a lost little kid, that she has nowhere to go, because all of us here in television seen the doctor with so many companions. So you could, in all the time that the doctor has nobody to be with, she has nothing to do. How about this advice over there in the BBC? Have the doctor visit his or her granddaughter to find out what happened to her after all these years. So we only deal with that at Big Finish. So I'm a little bit disappointed, because this story could have been potentially real good, because but it left so much out, and it's so unusual that it went like Texas was saying, it did too much too fast. And I didn't understand this girl's mom that much, and then the way she was questioning how she knows the doctor, that does she knows the doctor? We don't know nothing about that, like that. Maybe in another episode that something might answer to that, but it had too much stuff too fast, and then it left me disappointed, and I'm sorry to say that. That's my opening statement.
Okay, let's move along here. Let's go on up to AJ.
Sorry. Hi there. Good to be back. This episode was kind of It was there. I watched it. I did enjoy the spiders in this episode. I do wish this was a two-part episode where it sort of ends on a cliffhanger where one of the spiders starts talking. And the second part is the Doctor and all that dealing with the spiders now being an intelligent new species. That I think they could have elaborated on that story a bit more, other than just, oh, big spiders, 8-legged freaks. Yeah. I did like the aspects of Graham seeing his the ghost of his wife, reminding him about the garbage and this and that and so on. Gives you a little tug on the heartstrings there. But for the most part, most of this sort of story was a little bit forgettable. There were little scenes that were ripped off from movies and other TV shows, which I'll mention later on. But it was an okay episode, not the best, not the worst.
Okay, and last but certainly not least, Philip Archer.
I kind of think that the title, Arachnids in the UK, is a bit of a fake out because it basically was set in a hotel. So you could have just gone with Hotel Arachna, and that would have been it. But, otherwise, the story was a bit lame because it's unpredictable to a certain level. The spiders visually were very well done and very well realised. I like that. That was cool. The Chris Noth character, he got on my nerves within 5 minutes of being in the. I wish he would have been killed in that bathroom over his bodyguard bloke, because it was just like, oh, for God's sake, why is he still alive? And the Doctor, I agree with Will. She was like a lost lamb running around, just don't know what she's doing half the time. And the fact that like what Will said, that she feels alone. She feels alone when they're back home. It's like, well, you can just fly off and find other companions, or go visit another companion and have a bit of fun with them, and then come back for this lot. And it's true that what Will says about them, the companions are find her like a drug. I got a feeling that one of these days, one of these episodes, someone's going to become a cropper. And that would be the fault of the Doctor, because he did warn them, this is the dangerous thing. Well, she did warn them, this is the dangerous thing, but it's up to you if you want to come along with me. The episode itself, I did enjoy Yaz's mum more than anybody else in the show, because she was quite funny, constantly trying to find out whether Yaz is bonking either Ryan or even the Doctor for that matter. So that was quite funny. Other than that, the spiders would have been well better served if they had a bit of more intelligence to them, of their attack, kind of like mentally linking to each other and having an actual threat kind of thing. Having a plan, rather than just running around trying to look for food. It would have been better like that. But otherwise, it wasn't much copper story for me.
I think what was going on was, I don't think they wanted to make the spiders too intelligent, because then people would start thinking that this is somehow linked to Planet of the Spiders and things like that. Now, like I said, my points are, the American guy, Chris Noth, he started out, he pretty okay. He's just an arrogant, rich bastard, and he was playing that character rather well. But then suddenly he just became the stereotypical American gun guy. But a couple of the points they did bring up, which, like I said, I still don't get. And this is the same thing about way back in the Ghost Monument, when she went off on Ryan about using guns. It's like, he's using guns to kill robots. Not people, robots. In this case, well, they deserve to die humanely. So let me get this straight. You've got this giant spider that has literally grown so big that it can no longer absorb enough oxygen. Therefore, it is slowly dying in pain, because it is literally suffocating to death because it's so big. Yet shooting it and putting it out of its misery is wrong. See, that's the kind of the things that kind of threw me some mixed signals. But once again, it just seems like, Americans, guns, and all that being associated again, just like they've done before in previous series. But other than that, like I said, I thought it was well paced. There wasn't any parts where it really dragged. There wasn't any parts where it really got boring. I'll have to give it that much. But other than that, like I said, I enjoyed the story myself, but I kind of agree with you. I could have seen this as a two-parter where you could have drugged the suspense out a bit more, leading up to something more massive than just, this particular town having this type of thing going on, or you could have made it like a worldwide threat maybe. But at the same time, like I said, I can see why they didn't make the spiders to it. Plus, as someone brought up, I brought this up before we came in. Yeah, you can see a big relation to all the way back at the Green Death, where you had basically the same thing going on. You had toxic waste being dumped down a mine, and then you find out, it's leading to these super maggots that are leading to these super insects that could become a worldwide threat. And it just felt like the same thing to me, only redressed with arachnids. But I think it really would have made it work. And maybe I'm an oldster, but maybe if they'd made a reference to the fact that maybe this mine happened to tie into the old one, or make a little mention of global chemicals, I think that would have thrown a little more perspective on it for the classic fans. Also, I thought originally when I started watching this had been written by one of the new writers, and sure enough, thankfully Philip reminded me this one was written by Chris Chibnall. Chibs, you know this shit. Why didn't you bring it up? But I would have liked to have seen a line about, "You're damn straight. I'm scared about spiders. I got killed by one once." But but I don't know. That's just me. I'm an old school. Let's hear what you guys, because I already got hands flying up. So let's start with William. What do you want to say?
Well, I'm a little bit upset. Another reason why I'm upset is the Chris North, like you said, Chris North shot he shot the spider to get rid of it, not to take it out of his misery. He just used that excuse because the doctor said he was already dying. And I'm like, says what happened like a day or two over here in Pittsburgh. What happened in the church? I like this is that's like I'm a little bit upset about this episode using a gun like that, considering now a few years ago they didn't show a robot having his head cut off because of a certain situation with ISIS, which even though there are two different stories, that don't make no sense. But another thing the one thing I did like is, of course, this girl's mom. She was pretty cool. Especially telling Chris North off, and then, being upset that for the first time her husband was right on something. That her character is pretty good. Now I hope maybe another episode too, she could return. Maybe she could have a good talk with the doctor like that. But like Phil said and other people said, if the doctor is traveling with a companion and it's more than one, and that companion has a job and family, then the doctor needs to either start getting, let them go and find new companions, or let this one deal with their situation and go back and meet one of your past companions that might need a help or two from you. But the thing is, like Connor was saying, this is a 50-minute episode, and it's how to fit so much thing in it. But I did like the idea, Freedom, that if that bottom of the cave could have been something with either with the Planet of Spiders or the one, the Green Death, that'll make this story much better. But at the funny same time, you got to remember that the girl scientist was the one that was modifying some of these spiders to make them a little more bigger like that, for she could make super strong silk spider web like that. So in a way, it was her. In the off way, it's her fault how these spiders got the way they are, because they remember when the spider was dying, they were being thrown away, and then of course she didn't know where the dump was like that. But she was part of the experiment that was enhancing these spiders like that. And again, this episode did not show what happened to the lab that was doing the experiments on the spider, just like we didn't find out what happened to the Chris No character. And again, it could, like you said, it could have been a two-parter, but it's hard to, because I got my advice is the Chimno, don't write every episode for the whole season. Just write 2 or 3. Let some other writers come in, especially those who have been writing Doctor Who before. Let them have a slice of the pie.
Yeah, look at how well that worked out with Class. Okay, but one other point, I forgot to bring up. Yeah, we're gonna lure all these spiders into this panic room, and we're gonna lock it off so they can die humanely. And I'm like, so you're gonna, rather than just shoot them, you're going to lure them into a room where they're all either gonna just starve and or once again slowly suffocate to death. I don't know. That's just still weighing on my mind a little bit. Okay, Connor, go ahead.
A couple of points that I missed out on as well. I think that it's very clear now at this point that Chris Chibnall is absolutely crap at writing plot. He's great at writing characters, but he's crap at writing plot. And I think that, to be honest, it's really starting to affect the series, because it was all right for 2 weeks or so, but now not having villains that you can talk about or be genuinely thrilled by or astounded by is just, it's starting to weigh on the series. But the character moments are making up for it. I've got to say that I think that this is actually the best use of the ensemble so far. They felt connected. Jodie was great and actually taking control for once, which is a criticism that I had of the Ghost Monument. It feels like the characters are all great, but at the same time, he's making the Doctor far too good, I think, in terms of her points of view. Yeah, shooting something, not always the best thing to do, but I prefer characters where you have a point where you're like, I don't quite agree with that. And I think that this Doctor is just kind of like spewing out all of these quotes that like will get the whole majority of like SJWs, I'll say, going, hey, great role model. Like there's nothing to combat the good, because we've always been used to a Doctor where I think that he's kind of always played both sides of the coin, particularly David Tennant, who is probably the most relatable Doctor to this one. A little more human, a little more appreciative of the human interaction and the human aspect of every adventure. And I just feel like this Doctor is just playing too much on the child hero. We'll say all the right things at the right time, and that's it. We're not going to have any point of contention. We're not going to have any seriousness about her. I just would like to see a little more to Jodie's character, I think, even though she is really getting into it now. I think she's owning it for the first time. Another point was, I think writing-wise, Chris Chibnall has taken too much on. This one feels a bit like he's thought, well, we've got 9 episodes, we've got 4 or 5 guest writers that have contributed, but I want to make 10 stories, so I need one more. So I'm just going to throw out a random spider invasion plot. You can tell those sort of episodes where it's a little bit rushed, writing-wise. But it's clear, like AJ said with the grief bits with Bradley Walsh's character, Graham, they're the bits that, at the moment, I think you're really watching for. Not the villains and not the plot, which I think needs to be more centre of the show again. As opposed to, I think it needs to be a fine balance rather than just like either have the character-driven Doctor Who of Chris Chibnall or the plot-driven Doctor Who of Stephen Moffat.
Well, if I could comment on some of the comments, adding a second episode to this wouldn't have helped it at all. This episode's whole problem is in the writing, and you can tell a good story in 50 minutes. We did that last week. I mean, it's been done before. This is just weak writing on the part of the writer. And he could have tied it together and made it more interesting and made a better story out of it. In other words, all the elements are there. And Connor's right. The best things about it were the character development of the characters. They all did fine. Even the Doctor, I mean, people are saying, oh, well, God, she's so stupid she can't go without her friends. But no, I mean, from her viewpoint, those last 3 episodes were one adventure. I mean, she like she says, she's still finding her feet. And that's not really a weakness. I just think that's them dragging it out a little bit before she really is. I mean, in other words, you're going to get to her next series before you're going to really have a clear indication. And I think Connor's right also. They are making her a bit too goody-goody. She should be a bit clumsy, maybe a bit more taking too many risks or whatever. But I mean, she warns them. As for the comments about the companions being like as a drug to them, that's how it's always been, though, to be fair. I mean, in the episode where we see the return of Sarah Jane, I mean, she's like, you know what? She's in withdrawal. I mean, it's like there's nothing to match being with the Doctor. And then you see Donna's reaction when he returns, and she goes with him because she had the opportunity and she didn't, and she ended up feeling sorry for herself for a year until he came back and picked her up. So I mean, it's always that's always a companion trait, I would think, and they could just be setting it up for some tragedy. I do think though the best parts of the episode were the companions in that sense. There was a lot of development for them. They're all very likable people, and I think that the main problem in this episode was in fact the writing. I mean, he could have told a much better story with all the elements he included. Also, the idea that they're going to include a bunch of references to the classic series, you kind of need to get past that. They're not going to do that. They're not writing this show for classic Doctor Who fans anymore. They're writing it for a new audience. That's obvious. And obviously he's trying to go for a much younger audience with all the preaching that the Doctor does about, how guns are bad. So, I mean, that kind of thing. And we've had a lot of that in the four episodes about, and that ties into Connor's point about her being a bit too much of a goody-goody. I mean, why didn't she just say, or why not just punch the gun out of the guy's hand and do something, like awkward, like instead of just, moaning about it, do something about it. I just think this is all a problem in the writing, and that hopefully that's something they can get past. Because adding a second episode, that'd be a disaster. Then you'd have a really bad story stretched out over 2 episodes, and that would have been a waste of time. Anyway, as you were.
Yeah, for me, when someone mentioned earlier about the waste and how the scientist is more or less to blame, well, in a way she really isn't, because medical and scientific waste is supposed to be incinerated. So as far as she was knowing, it was getting taken away to be disposed of correctly. To say it was her fault really isn't really fair. I mean, it's not her fault, and it kind of is the guy's fault, the hotel guy, Jack Robinson, who basically just dumped it onto there and really didn't care what happened to it, more or less. But the thing is that in this episode, it's very ambiguous. Who is the bad guy? Is it the spiders? Is it Jack? Is it the scientist? Technically, none of them really are the bad guy, which is really frustrating. You need someone to boo and hits, I think, at least.
Yeah, I'm starting to agree with Tim. I think she should have Sonic the gun and it fell to pieces. That would have been cool.
Yeah, I agree with everyone saying that there should have been a bit more risk taken with Jodie's Doctor, or even the companions. Let's just say that one of the companions gets nabbed by the spider and then cocooned up, and then you've got someone who's in immediate threat of death from the spider, and then gets saved along the way. But also, at the end of the day as well, I did like the fact that we'd seen the TARDIS in flight in the vortex. That's a nice little scene to see that. I like that. And what else? But again, inside the TARDIS, I'm not getting a proper view of the damn thing. It's all too fast, flashish images of it. And I'm thinking, can't they just slow it down a bit and give us a nice general view of the place rather than it being dashing around the console and that's it? But yeah, I think there should have been a bit more threat to the story with the spiders doing an actual killing or capturing of the companion and let the companion's life be threatened.
Also, they stole one of my gags. There was one that I was going to use in the audio that's coming up, and it was going to be in the next chapter or so. Because one of the great experiences I've had, if you've played enough Dungeons and Dragons, you always get a party set up, or even if you're playing, say, Palladium Rifts, you always get this big bad party. They burst into a room. I'm covering the right flank. I'm covering the left flank. I've got down the middle, and no one ever looks up. That was the one thing I always got parties on back in the day. So I was kind of glad they brought that up, because I was going to use that in the upcoming part of the story I'm doing. Was nobody ever looks up, because that's where the trap always is, because nobody looks there. It's like, I've got it covered. But then, yeah, I love that scene with Graham and Ryan. Did you check the ceiling? No, I thought you did. That bit had me in stitches, because having done that for so many years, I know what that's like when people forget to look up. Okay, AJ, go ahead.
Just on Phil's point about the time vortex, for me that reminded me as a ripoff of Bill and Ted. You know how they travel through the time conduits and then they open up into this big space full of all these random holes. To me, that's exactly what that looked like. They just took it out of the movie and put it in the show.
There was a criticism for The Woman Who Fell to Earth that I remembered when watching this episode, and it was that Chris Chibnall is not as good as Stephen Moffat at humour, but he is. But it's a different form of humour. It's unintentional, because I think by far one of the funniest things I've ever seen out of Doctor Who recently is grime music playing with the shot of spiders scuttling across the floor. It's ridiculous. I don't know who would come up with that, but seeing something as stupid as that in an episode that is kind of like the encapsulation of stupid, just made it does make the viewing experience like a little more worthwhile, especially if it's nothing to write home about or it's a boring episode. So just the use of music. This year, we've had two, really. We've had Rise Up last week, and we had this. Two completely different scenarios. But it's pretty genius, I gotta say. Like, just using grime, I just couldn't think of... Just using grime music to defeat spiders in a hotel. I just don't understand it. But Chris Chibnall is great at unintentional humour, more than intentional, which is, I think, Moffat's sort of brand. So I think that it kind of dispels the criticism that particular review had of The Woman Who Fell to Earth.
Yeah, I got a kick out of Graham's line there, with I can't believe they're heading towards that music. That gave me a little bit of a chuckle.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's another example of how the episode isn't really totally bad. It's just it just could have been so much tighter and better had the writing been better. I think that's an example of where the problem is in this particular story. That, and I think the Vortex was a bit disco, Phil, but there you go.
Yeah, I was halfway expecting to hear Staying Alive start playing when they were going through the Vortex. It's like, it was a little disco ball-y to me. I don't know. Maybe I'm crazy. Maybe it's just because I grew up in that time. I don't know what it is. But like I said, it wasn't horrifically bad. It could have been a lot worse. It could have been Love and Monsters bad. At least that's my opinion.
Yeah, I just want to say there's one thing that's really bugging me, and that's been since it's come back. I love Jodie. I think she's doing great. But why does she have to be so pronounced with the way she uses a sonic screwdriver? It's like, stand to the side, up, over. It doesn't need to be pronounced like that. It's just a flick. It's just, you're going to use it. Don't just stand to the side, be prepared, and off you go. It just doesn't look right. That's all I wanted to say.
I'm kind of looking forward to a fan making a video of her, just all her uses of the Sonic over this season, and setting it to like Vogue by Madonna.
Yeah.
Strike the pose. Because that's one thing that does bug me a little bit. How the use of the Sonic is always posed like, stand aside, mere mortals, while I use this Sonic to save you. It just, oh man.
It is interesting actually about that, because it feels very classic. It feels very retro that you would have a doctor that would overact such small bits like that. It reminds me of like John Pertwee, like the infamous John Pertwee in Pain overacting. It like in Spearhead from Space. It's just not. If you were to go into like a theatre or something and do that now, they'd laugh you off the stage. But it feels kind of retro, and I guess that's what kind of aligns the two classic Doctors as well a little more, is that she's not afraid to kind of overact in situations. It makes it kind of more fun, I guess, even though it's just totally ridiculous and probably unprofessional of an actor to overact in that sort of manner. You wouldn't see many actors even bother to do that. They just try to play probably straight. Yeah,
that scene where the giant spiders crawling around inside that big huge room, it reminded me of the gym scene from, I believe it was Tarantula. That's what I'm thinking of. Was it Earth versus the Spider? I can't remember which one it was. But you had a bunch of these kids. It's like, let's go into this room and let's have like a dance. And meanwhile, there's a giant unconscious huge tarantula on the other side of the room. That's what it kind of reminded me of, the way the creature moved around and all that inside there. It reminded me of that scene for some reason.
That was Earth versus the Spider.
It was Earth versus the Spider. Okay, it's been a while since I've seen either of those. So I wasn't sure which one.
I will also add to the point that the Graham and Grace scenes were very nice touches to the story. I thought They were the most interesting part of the whole thing, to be honest. And it gave me a little lump in the throat because you can feel Graham's kind of like lost and trying to find a place in the universe without her. And the way she's sort of like giving him like pointing to say, like, you know what, you got this to do, you got that to do, but do that when you get back from your trips around the universe. But they were nice. It was nice. And the end part with that Team TARDIS, I wanted to punch the screen, man. Like, for God's sake, what are you going to call them Team TARDIS for? Get out of it. They're your companion, not your football crowd, man. Come on. But there you go.
Okay, fam. No, going back to Connor. I don't get me wrong. I don't think it was over. I don't think she's overacting when she's doing the screwdriver. I think it's either the way she's been told how to do it or it's her take on it. But I don't think it's her overacting. I just think she's doing it wrong. Basically, that's it.
Oh, but yeah, I can see where they're going, though, because I was really glad they did throw those scenes in there, because one of the things people have been going on about was about how they didn't, sure, they were bringing up Grace every now and then, but they didn't really deal with it. But at the same time, you have to remember, they were in these different situations, and they had to kind of leave that to the side, till they got out of it. And I'm really glad that now that they came back home, that Graham had a chance to go face that kind of sort of head on. I do really appreciate the fact they threw those scenes in there, because it really helped show that he's still grieving and all that.
You say that you want to punch the screen, Philip, but I've got to say that a bit like last week when he said that he didn't want to be involved, I thought that Graham is getting all the really weighty scenes, all the ones that are full of pathos and all that sort of stuff. The way that he described the reasoning behind why he wanted to travel was heart-wrenching, to be honest. He didn't want to be sat at home grieving for a year, probably, or more. He'd just rather get on with his life. And that's kind of what Grace was. I feel like in a way that's what Grace, for the whole episode, in her little scenes, was almost trying to make him do, like, go with the Doctor, kind of see the world, see the universe, don't just sit at home and sniff coats. Yeah, I think he gets the best moments, to be fair, character-wise, for the whole emotional sort of backbone of this particular era of Doctor Who at the moment.
You would have thought that would have been handed over to Ryan more than Graham, because Graham's fairly new into her life, whereas Ryan's been there since he was a baby or growing up as a kid. So I would have thought that would have been Ryan's kind of like little piece to deal with rather than Graham, which is fair enough. I know he loves her, Graham and everything, but she's Ryan's nan more so than Graham's, wife.
Yeah, you're right, Phil. But to be fair, it's a different kind of relationship, isn't it? I mean, and Ryan did offer to go with him. I mean, and he just kind of said no. He needed to be alone for a minute. That was the whole point of that exercise, I believe. That was one of the better things about the episode. That whole business of Graham's dealing with his tragedy. Like Connor pointed out, I think Chibi's much better at the characterization writing than he is the actual plotting of the story.
And that kind of has me worried with the fact he's written like 5 episodes of this series. So I don't know. Maybe things will take a turnaround. We don't know yet. But yeah, there were, it didn't drag. I have to give him that. It was a good paced story. I did enjoy it. But at the same time, yeah, it was lacking in a few areas. Okay, anything else before we go ahead and rate this sucker and put it to bed?
Next time trailer, the baby man's come in. I'm going to go.
Oh, we are not supposed to mention that. No. He's just hiding a basketball.
Yeah, there were 2 scenes. The first one was when Yaz was driving up to the hotel to go get her mum. It reminded me of The Shining a little, of how they showed the hotel through at the beginning of the movie. And also the funny scene that I thought was the funniest was where the Doctor and the scientist are looking at the map of where all the spiders are, and you see Ryan in the background doing shadow puppets against the wall.
Yeah, Lady Gallifrey brought that up. She was chuckling her head off when he was doing that scene. So yeah, he's got some good background comedy going on. We have to say that. There's good character development, but at the same time, as we've pointed out, there's just a few things missing here and there that it really needs. Okay, we're going ahead and rate this sucker and we'll put it to bed. So starting at the top this time, we're going to start with Philip. What do you think of this one? Out of 10, what do you give Arachnids in the UK?
Right. Initially, when I first watched it, I gave it a 5 in my head. On second watch, though, I found it a bit more palatable. So I'm gonna notch it up about a point and a half. So I'm gonna say 6.5 on this one. Okay.
Okay, AJ.
For me, it's going to be a 6. It's okay, but it's not great.
All right, William.
I'm going to split it right down the middle, give it a 5 out of 10.
All right, Dr. Grimm.
I'm going to give it a 6.5 out of 10.
All right,
Not
Connor.
great.
I'll go with Archer for once, 6.5.
All right, Tim.
I'll give it a 7.
That's what I was going to give it. I'm going to give it a 7 because even though it was lacking in some points, there was great background humor, as we've pointed out. There was those very touching scenes, with Graham. Bradley Walsh doing an excellent job again, as this character who's lost someone very close to him, and he's trying to deal with that grief. And also, as I said, the pacing was good. There wasn't any parts where it really got slow, dragged, or anything like that. And I found it to be, pretty amusing, story despite its shortcomings. So I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10. Next week, if I remember correctly, is the Saranga Conundrum, where we deal with, a guy with a medical condition, amongst other things. So join us then. We sit down and have a talk about that. See y'all later. Have a good one. Enjoy what's left of your weekend. Catch you on the flip side, kids.
Have a safe Halloween.